Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Smart Talk, Building a Cell and Gene Therapy Business Alliance. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Throughout the past decade, Philadelphia has climbed the charts as a leading life science hub in the U.S. This past year, Philadelphia ranked 6th on Newmark's 2020 list for innovation and growth areas, moving us ever closer towards Boston, San Francisco, and Seattle. But what exactly will it take for Philly to move higher? That's what we're here to learn this morning. This panel discussion will look at how a regional alliance for cell and gene therapy could cement Philly as the top life science market cluster in the US. On the panel this morning, we have people representing several different sectors of the cell and gene therapy community to share their particular insights into the needs of our city. To introduce them and to guide the discussion today, we have Sam Woods-Thomas, Director of Life Science and Biotechnology for Philadelphia's Department of Commerce, acting as our moderator. Good morning, Sam. Welcome.
Morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for doing this. Jake said I'm Sam Thomas. I am the Director of Life Science and Biotech for the City of Philadelphia. It's my job on behalf of the city to attract and retain and sort of strategically grow the life science sector. Today's discussion is going to be about sort of what it would take and what the impact of formalizing a life science business alliance would be. I want to sort of begin with the addendum that we all know that there's all sorts of groups out there who are doing this and who are sort of bringing companies together. And we're not saying it's not happening. I think what we're saying is if we could formalize it, if there could be sort of an advocacy industry group, what would that look like, and how would we be able to do it? I think we know that in economic development, it's very important to have industry-led advocacy groups because it sort of filters out a lot of the bureaucratic talk. It's sort of right from the source. So we've got a really good panel, and I'm going to introduce the panelists, and I'm going to ask them sort of to give a very brief overview of their industry and how their industry interacts with the life science sector. So first up, we have Matt Wilson, who's the VP of Product Discovery and Internal Innovation for Scout Bio.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me today. So Scout is a gene therapy company based in Philadelphia. We work on companion animal therapeutics. Spun out of University of Pennsylvania. We've grown it from 1 employee to 27 as of today. I'd say we fit into the ecosystem as, a life science company, lab space, building products, really research focused.
Great. Next up, we've got Megan Kelly. She's Director of Business Attraction, Expansion, and Life Sciences for Select Greater Philadelphia.
Thanks, Sam. So hi, everybody. Megan Kelly. I lead the business attraction effort for life sciences at Select, which is the business attraction arm of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. So the Chamber is a not-for-profit organization, a non-government organization. Our role is to really kind of message and market to outside audiences about the strengths of our ecosystem. And through messaging and marketing, try to pull companies into the region and then connect them to the various, government entities, industry players, academics, healthcare institutions, to whom we're connected through the Chamber.
Next up, we've got Kurt Imhoff, who's the VP of Policy and Public Affairs for Life Sciences Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Sam, and good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So as Sam noted, I'm with Life Sciences Pennsylvania. Life Sciences Pennsylvania is the statewide trade association for the Commonwealth's life sciences community. Our membership is comprised of large pharmaceutical manufacturers, device and diagnostic makers, small biotech companies, academic research institutions, patient advocacy groups, investment firms with R&D-based portfolios, and then all of these service providers that really prop up that industry. So law firms and accounting firms, clinical research organizations. So all of those support services, the industry around the industry necessary for our companies to grow. As an organization, to one of your questions, Sam, we really have two core accountabilities. public policy advocacy, and facilitating strategic connections.
And lastly, we have Tom Dalfo, who's a senior VP at the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, PIDC.
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. PIDC, I'm the Senior Vice President for Real Estate Services at PIDC. PIDC is a public-private partnership focused on driving investment and development into the city of Philadelphia to create tax ratables and jobs to help grow the economy. As it relates to life sciences, PIDC, in many ways, we're sort of right in the heart of it. We have real estate that supports the market. Among the real estate holdings that PIDC has is the Navy Yard, where we have close to 1 million square feet of life sciences, heavily on the cell and gene therapy and production side at the Navy Yard, and are expanding that every day. We also have some real estate that we're looking to position to support the industry as it grows over the next several years. And somewhat similar to what both Kurt and Megan do, we've been trying to advocate for certain elements of the industry to help support it going forward, with heavy emphasis on workforce to make sure that the investment and development in this sector are the benefits are broad and wide amongst Philadelphians.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining us on this panel. I kind of want to start by setting the table, sort of understanding the appetite and sort of the need for a formalized industry group within the life sciences. And I think there's probably no better person to start with than Matt, who's the only person who works for a life science business on this panel. So Matt, from your perspective of owning or operating a life science business, how has it been starting and growing a business here? And can you sort of help us understand the various phases of life science companies as they grow, and what sort of support, internal and external, is needed at each phase to sort of help ensure the company grows to the next one?
Yeah. So we spun out Scout from University of Pennsylvania in 2017. I'm a founder and employee one, and we've scaled the company, like I said, to 27. Taking on venture rounds to help that growth. And we've stayed in Philadelphia. Our offices are on Market Street, 3675. I'm from Philadelphia. I went to school in Philadelphia, so I wanted to stay here. But I can say after the fact, since starting Scout, it's been lovely to really scale a company in Philadelphia, at least in these first iterations. As we think internally about scaling, we try to focus on the FTE growth in factors of 3. So going from 1 to 3, 3 to 9, 9 to 27. And we think those are kind of the milestone points as, internally as we scale and, building processes to help that growth. What we've seen in Philadelphia, though, which I think is exciting, is, it's affordable. Most of our money is not coming from Philadelphia. Most of it's coming from San Francisco or Cambridge. So at least, building out lab space hasn't been an issue. Hiring hasn't been an issue. Quality of life in the city on, what you would consider to be a standard biotech salary is great. It's actually a driver for us bringing people outside of Philly into Philadelphia, which I think we've been excited about. The infrastructure that's been put in place so far for these mid-scale companies, specifically at 3675 through CIC and biolabs, it's been great for us. And I think the waiting list that we've seen over there of about 18 months has reflected that. So I think so far it's been great. I think now that we're starting to think about growth, on that next factor, by that next factor of 3, where we're moving away from laboratory space and expanding more into, large manufacturing, GMP operations. I think that's where we've started to see some challenges, especially sourcing real estate in the city. That being said, there's a great ecosystem just outside the city. But look, I think maybe, this has been a great place to start a company and continue to grow it. And I wonder, how the community can continue to support companies as they grow in their life cycle. And I guess that's why we're here today. But yeah.
Right. And Matt, sticking with you, from your perspective, Is there an appetite within the business community to sort of formalize and band together? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, I think we're all pretty collaborative, especially companies that are at this kind of pre-IPO stage, that have taken on a significant amount of venture capital, and have a handful of FTEs, but are not quite at that 50 or 100 FTE count. Just in our building, we know kind of all the research directors. We communicate on a regular basis, even with small pieces, or even around small pieces of advice like intern programs. How can we utilize Drexel internship program, or go to Penn on-campus recruiting? I think the larger efforts where we may run it, I think we're all collaborative, but I think the larger efforts, like co-building a manufacturing facility together, may be more challenging, especially when a board needs to get involved. However, from an advocacy, I think there's more than enough appetite there. And where I've only seen this really potentially be confrontational are, as we have companies that spin out from universities, sometimes there's very similar technology that does spin out. So there could be overlap and almost, like a sibling rivalry to a certain degree, maybe slight differences in what a company's doing, but ultimately similar platforms, similar indications. But, I think the community's supportive. And most of the people that are, early stage of these companies are scientists, and generally scientists are collaborative. So I think there is an opportunity there. But when we start thinking about larger projects where, there may be more of a financial commitment, I think we're going to run into problems.
Thank you. I want to open this next one up to the group, sort of to understand everyone's perspective. Why does this group think that a formalized business alliance is important for life sciences in Philadelphia? What sort of things do you think that group could achieve that kind of the way we're doing things now hasn't been able to?
I can start, Sam. First of all, I want to point out that there are business alliances, and I think we each kind of represent a unique one on this panel, with the exception of Matt, who obviously is representing a company. So the Chamber of Commerce has a health and life sciences action team that is comprised of life sciences industry representatives, healthcare institution representatives, and then service providers who do business with the industry. And they meet a couple of times a year to talk about issues related to growth and competitiveness, business attraction, talent development, and that sort of thing. The Chamber also does advocacy. However, because the Chamber represents businesses of all industries throughout the greater Philadelphia region, obviously, having a disparate membership means that your advocacy agenda has to be broader, right? And more broadly applicable to a membership that encompasses, close to 5,000 companies in the region. And so we do have, strong partnerships with Kurt and his organization at Life Sciences PA, and I'm sure, he'll give some perspective in a moment. What we also don't have, but our partners do, is access to financing and funding, right? So that's where the states and the city come into play when it comes to having kind of jurisdiction over incentives and financing that can attract a company to our region. So if we're looking at the possibility of creating a formalized alliance that is new and can add value to the market, I think it would be really important to think about something that is almost quasi-public, in that it could provide all of the sort of networking and, business attraction, marketing, messaging, services that the Chamber provides, but also have access to the finances or financing and incentives, and ideally, an advocacy agenda that's more, targeted to the industry. There is an example of something like this in Massachusetts. It's called the Massachusetts Life Science Center, and it is a public-private economic development and investment agency. So they do all of the things sort of that the chamber does, except that they also have access to financing programs that encourage companies to invest. And I've recently looked at their stats. Since their creation in 2007, they deployed over $700 million in Massachusetts through a combination of grants, loans, capital infrastructure investments, tax incentive, and workforce programs. So, that's pretty impressive. And I don't think that we are quite there yet.
Sam, this is Tony. I'm wondering if I could make a comment. So I'm Tony Green. I'm Vice President at Ben Franklin Technology Partners. And I want to put a huge stamp on what Megan had to say. I'm actually a bit contrarian here. I think that creating another alliance may muddle the issue. And I think that the work that Kurt and Chris and Life Sciences PA is, quite frankly, sufficient. It may be expanded, but I think they do an amazing job in advocacy for all of Pennsylvania, which speaks to Megan's point about the need for an innovation life sciences agenda in Harrisburg. The example of Massachusetts is sobering. We look at this all the time, and this is not just a Ben Franklin issue. This is a statewide and a regional issue. All boats rise. The other piece I want to just bring out there is that while cell and gene therapy is on the ascendance, it's still not the most dominant sector in this region. There is still 60% is still in traditional drugs, medical devices, digital health, and so forth. And so I want to be careful about putting all our resources into one new bucket at the expense of others. Cell and gene therapy, no question. I worked with Jim Wilson and Kathy Hyde for years in support of theirs when they were still making their ideas come to fruition. So I just want to put it out there that there is some infrastructure already resident here in the region. And I just get a little nervous about trying to create something new that may in fact be duplicative or can't be done within the constraints or the of an existing organization, in this case, Life Sciences PA. Just a thought.
It's a good thought. We don't want to sort of load on too many organizations, too many alliances. I think what we're talking about here is either formation of a new one or sort of the reintegration of the old ones into one common purpose. The last thing anyone wants to do is start a new steering committee that everybody has to sit on.
Thank you.
Because I think we all have enough Zoom meetings as it is. Sort of with that being said, and kind of with what Megan said and what you said about other industries, I think it might not be a bad idea right now to move into kind of advocacy and policy, how this new group, or the conglomeration of old groups, however it ends up looking, can sort of advocate across the Commonwealth and perhaps even with city government for new programs, new incentives, new policies, whatever it might be. I think a good person to go to for that is Kurt Imhoff. Can you sort of give us an idea, Kurt, of like the level of collaboration, not only across Philadelphia, but across Pennsylvania, from Philly to Pittsburgh and whatever's going on out there in Butler County?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, Sam, and thank you, Tony, for his comments. Tony, your check's in the mail for your noting of Life Sciences Pennsylvania. And we really appreciate that. And I think we do have a collaborative dynamic that we foster at our organization, recognizing though that we are dealing with two very different ecosystems. Philadelphia and the surrounding suburban counties have been so biopharmaceutical focused for so long. It's obviously very different than what Pittsburgh looks like, which has very much been device and diagnostic heavy. Now we're starting to see some new companies, Crystal Biotech, Cook Myocyte, in that cell and gene based therapy spring up in southwestern Pennsylvania, but still obviously very different ecosystems that we're dealing with here. And I think as a statewide trade association, obviously we want to be somewhat careful about not prioritizing one region too much over another. But that said, we have worked with a number of the entities that Megan mentioned, chambers and both sides of the Commonwealth and others, to talk about how we really raise these issues up to the legislators and the governor. So, but to your point about collaboration across the Commonwealth, honestly, I think that's one of the things that we do best, is bring those two sides of the state together, whether it's just in our normal programs and events that happen throughout the year, or in our advocacy days that we just had 2 weeks ago, where we had about meetings with close to 30 legislators, and we had about 50 to 60 companies represented in those meetings. It really is a way to introduce a lot of our member companies and the life sciences in general to legislators that may be from Butler County or Potter County, or places that clearly just don't have much of an understanding or kind of a visibility of what the life sciences really look like.
Right, and sort of digging deeper and maybe more specifically, as we think about advocacy and sort of lobbying, are there any programs? I know Megan mentioned all the fantastic programs that our peer cities have, that we should be, this organization or the conglomeration of many organizations should be advocating for, incentives, kind of new policies, anything that's on your radar that would be very helpful to us?
Absolutely. So the research and development tax credit has been a long-time policy priority of Life Sciences Pennsylvania's. That credit has been capped at about 55 million for the last, I think, 10 years. So we haven't seen a significant increase there for a while. However, we have seen a lot of submissions for that program just last year. I think, though it's capped at 55 million, there were applications totaling around 200 million that came into the R&D tax credit program in 2020. So there's clearly an appetite for an increase there. Same thing with the greenhouses, life sciences greenhouses, and back to Tony Green with the Ben Franklin Technology Partners, all really important programs that help our companies grow with that initial seed funding, or continue to develop with tax credit dollars and other capital coming in to these companies. So those are programs that we advocate for on a regular basis. And I think everyone on here probably knows the difficult fiscal situation that's existed in Pennsylvania over the past, I don't know, it seems like forever at this point. But Pennsylvania has been in a precarious fiscal situation for as long as I can remember. Things I think may be a little bit better this year, given some of the federal dollars that are coming in to help offset some structural deficit dollars in the Pennsylvania budget. But still, that's been the real barrier here, has been just the limited fiscal resources that the Commonwealth can tap into over the years. And to Megan's point on the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, I think that center has had about $1.5 billion allocated to it since 2007. So just a very different foresight on the part of the Massachusetts legislature than those in Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
And Sam, if I can jump in just to add to it, because I think what Kurt points out is the challenge of making a broad swath of population aware of the benefits associated with this, because it's not readily clear to folks. And I can't speak to sort of the work that Life Sciences PA is doing in the counties, but it sounds very similar to some of the challenges that we face as we talk about trying to reposition sites to support this sector, and having sort of residents in nearby communities that would sort of be likely beneficiaries of that investment, with some opportunities for jobs, for supply chains, for services that businesses would consume. It just feels disconnected. And I think what I see on a very sort of neighborhood level within Philadelphia is probably a version, it sounds like, when you get to sort of places that we don't think of as sort of engaged in this sector. Are there ways to one, just raise the profile, and two, actually make the connection? Because I think once people see that they're hitched to this wagon, they get really supportive pretty fast.
If I could just jump in there, Sam, sorry to piggyback on
anyone just jump in whenever you want.
But I do think Tom really raises an interesting point about connecting public officials just in general to the industry, cell and gene therapy or otherwise. That's something that we face in Harrisburg that can be very challenging. And it's a dynamic that maybe you're going to get into, Sam, but I think is really important to note to everyone. You know, over the years, as politics has shifted and demographics have shifted, we've really seen leadership in the legislature shift to Republicans in places of the Commonwealth that don't have a significant life sciences presence. So if you look at the list of leadership in the Commonwealth right now, you know, you'll see folks from Center County, from Armstrong County, from Lancaster County, Westmoreland County, a lot of places that unfortunately just don't have a significant life sciences footprint. So any work we can do, honestly, whether it's through an alliance or otherwise, to make connections to legislators to help them understand that these are not just, you know, Philadelphia, Southeastern Pennsylvania, or Pittsburgh specific jobs is really important. You know, it's one of those things where every couple of years we work for Health Pennsylvania, a program we partner with, puts together a list of vendor spend dollars. So the 16 largest biopharmaceutical manufacturers provide their dollars and where they're spending them in what districts, what congressional districts, what Senate and state districts. And it's helpful in letting people know that there is a connection to the industry. I always go back to an anecdote about Sanofi Pasteur, who manufactures a flu vaccine in Swiftwater, Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania. That facility uses about 1 million eggs per day, all from Pennsylvania farms, to manufacture that vaccine. It's a pretty incredible story and obviously has an incredible tie-in to Pennsylvania's agriculture industry. So it really does connect with some other legislators. But if there's ways in which to do that in a growing sector like cell and gene therapy, I think that'll be very important in advocating or helping to ensure legislators understand that these jobs are beyond just the urban and suburban centers in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, most advanced manufacturing has a pretty deep and wide supply chain, and I'd be surprised that you get to the, might have to go a couple iterations of business to business before you find somebody in just about every county in Pennsylvania is not in some way already connected. It just may not be really apparent even to them, because their customer is then someone else's customer who, it's like whisper down the lane before you get to the end user being a cell and gene therapy company.
And quite frankly, that presents a unique opportunity because, as you know, the manufacturer of cell and gene therapy products is nothing but control of supply chain during that process. It's insanely complicated. It is fraught with error and challenges. And so building up that next generation of manufacturing technologies to support the local cell and gene therapy companies becomes an equally important component of the ecosystem. And so we have to think about that, to your point, Tom, about supply chain and doing it here. Well, this is the non-sexy part of discovery, is how are you going to make it and how are you going to get it out the door? Sanofi, which the old Connaught facility, 1 million eggs, they're still making the flu vaccine with eggs. I mean, that's technology from 100 years ago. At some point, somebody's going to develop that next generation that can be done recombinantly in a way that can be grown in a bio, and they're doing it now, but it still hasn't taken hold. But this is an equally important component of the cell and gene therapy, is all the infrastructure needed to get those products out the door.
So I just want to speak to Tony's comment there. I agree with it. I think if there's an explicit binary activity that we can pursue right now, it's building out more manufacturing space. And we see other hubs doing this across the United States right now. Specifically, Ohio and Texas have started to build out more cell and gene therapy manufacturing capacity. And we're seeing it, at the old GSK site with Brian O'Neill and Discovery Labs, and it looks like Beacon will be doing some work up just north of the main line. I forget what neighborhood, but it does look like more square footage will be built out. But just to challenge Tony's point, what I think is exciting about gene therapy is the processes are not completely dissimilar, almost analogous to what we've seen with recombinant biologics. And I think we do have the talent in the Philadelphia area to quickly segue into more cell and gene therapy capacity, especially AAV gene therapy manufacturing. It's a bioreactor, downstream chromatography. So I think there is an opportunity for Pennsylvania to, really move quickly with this if the real estate exists. And I think we will. And I think it'll be important for the companies that are in the area, especially the ones that have come out of Philadelphia and are looking to grow in that next iteration.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you're absolutely right that manufacturing has got to be the next step. And there's plenty of places here in Philadelphia and regionally we can do it. At the risk of getting even more into the weeds in Pennsylvania politics, and I know we have to keep this moving, all the regions that we talked about, Massachusetts, Maryland, New York, they are all generally advocating around life science development, I believe, in one major city, New York City, Baltimore, and what's that one in Massachusetts, Boston. We all know in Pennsylvania, and this is an irrefutable fact, we have the best two cities in the world. How do we sort of, as a state, as a city, and a region, how do we kind of navigate the complexities around having two major cities? How do we make sure that the wealth is spread accordingly? Is that something that, Kurt, as someone who's statewide, you think about a lot?
I think so, but again, I don't know that you have to go down that path too much because they are two very different ecosystems. With Philadelphia, along the I-95 corridor, and Pittsburgh, really in the Great Lakes, kind of Midwest, ecosystem. They're very different regions and have very different backgrounds. So I don't know that that there's a whole lot of thought to prioritization. I think both will generally succeed, but recognize that as geographically far apart as they are, there's just going to be some differences regardless of how things move in either city. I mean, we've seen incredible growth in Pittsburgh and in the AI sector, particularly when it comes to vehicles, with companies like Uber and Google and Argo and others. So that's not something that I would say Philadelphia is a clear is clearly a little bit behind Pittsburgh in, but so yeah, I don't. It's something to think about, but I try not. I don't think you put too much weight to it because they're just two completely different places, and though the political dynamics are there, and trying to make sure that legislators understand what the differences are is important. I think that's the kind of the best you can do. I will say maybe one of the things that Philadelphia suffers from a little bit in the surrounding counties is that there's a sense among some public officials that it'll be okay. With institutions like Penn and Temple and Drexel and the sprawling suburban campuses we've seen from some of our large pharmaceutical manufacturers, I think that that success has brought about some complacency on behalf of public officials. Just that, regardless of what happens, things will be okay in Philadelphia and the surrounding suburban counties. I remember being on a call with the state representative in Montgomery County when Teva was moving its headquarters to New Jersey from Pennsylvania. And I asked him if he thought, if he felt any concern from constituents, from township officials, et cetera, about this movement. And the answer was no. The general feeling among the folks that he's working with is that something will come in and take its place. If it's a pharmaceutical manufacturer, great. If it's another industry, that's fine too. But there was, there's a much different sense of consistency, I guess, among some public officials when it comes to southeastern Pennsylvania. And maybe that's borne out by some data. I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen that the census tract data that, or the census data that's going to be coming out will cause Pennsylvania to lose a congressional seat. That will likely be somewhere in, the southwestern or western portion of the Commonwealth, because population growth is increasing here. So, I think there's a little bit of a different feeling about the two geographies or two regions that may, I guess, in the end, may make folks in the Commonwealth be a little more interested in Pittsburgh, because they feel like there's more to do there, where Philadelphia has generally been all right for a while now.
Kurt, you're not suggesting that government officials such as myself have to do work, are you? Because that's against the contract I signed.
Yeah, never.
Okay, good. I didn't know if that was a shot across the bow or not. I want to keep the conversation rolling. Thanks everyone for the engaging conversation. I want to talk a little bit about sort of our efforts in attraction and retention of businesses and how the business community can really get involved in that. And because we've been maybe raining on the Philadelphia parade a little bit, I want to remind everyone that Philadelphia offers a whole lot, and the region offers a whole lot in terms of life science, value adds. And I want to go to Megan Kelly from Select to sort of talk about some of those and talk about her strategies on attraction and retention and how she feels that the industry can get involved in that and the work that's already being done.
Yep, thanks, Sam. So as I mentioned, Select is the business attraction arm of the chamber. So we have, kind of several organizations within the chamber. CEO Council for Growth is another one, and that group is really focused on looking at cell and gene therapy and initiatives in particular, how to make our region, competitive. They're doing workforce development work as well. So increasingly, there's more and more integration within the chamber on these buckets, let's say, of work. And so that's an encouraging thing. But as I mentioned before, the main way that we attract new business to the region is through messaging and marketing. So it's about developing the right narrative. It's about looking at ways that we can reach markets with that narrative, especially the competitor markets. So for instance, in the past year, we have worked with a firm that specializes in account-based marketing, and we've been able to identify about 250 companies in Boston, San Diego, New York, in Europe, and looking at preclinical stage cell and gene therapy companies that might be ripe for expansion, and then targeting those companies through LinkedIn advertising and direct email and calling, and using messages that that are compelling. I mean, the Navy Yard Master Plan event, for instance, was an event that our chamber put on last week. And that's just one example where we invited those 250 companies to come and, learn about the growth opportunities at the Navy Yard. So we're constantly trying to promote our region through messaging. We also, in normal times, we go to in-person events, conferences, industry, trade shows. We do international marketing missions to try to connect in person with companies in the industry and message that way. We partner with international trade and investment agencies in New York and DC, international business associations. We host delegations in normal times of companies coming in to explore the market and explore business development opportunities. So we look forward to hopefully returning to that in the fall. Let's hope. But those are just some of the strategies that we deploy. And then we, I think to your question, Sam, about how do we engage the industry in that work. So again, there's increasing sort of integration within the chamber and all its various, initiatives and sort of sub-organizations, if you will. I mentioned the Health and Life Sciences Action Team, which is a function of the chamber. I run that group now. And so it's great to be able to bounce ideas about business attraction off of a group of industry experts that might not otherwise be part of my sort of orbit of stakeholders, right? There's a sort of the orbit of, our partners in economic development. Sam, you and your colleagues are one. Tom, PIDC is a strong partner. Kurt, you guys are a strong partner. But now being able to kind of look to our chamber members for advice and guidance about this type of thing is a really interesting new perspective, right? That goes beyond the world of, let's say, economic development. And so, I want to see kind of more further integration in that way. And if I might, I just want to plug right here a call to action that if any of you on this call are chamber members and are not on our Health and Life Sciences Action Team, I hope you will contact me because I'll put you on the list and make sure that you're getting meeting invitations. Or if you're not a chamber member and want to be, you can also contact me as well. So yeah, it's good to see that we can increasingly rely on industry for insight there.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. You've been a fantastic partner in every attraction effort we have undergone. I want to sort of move to something that's probably as important as business attraction. It really ties into it, and I want to open this up to the entire group. Workforce development in the life sciences has become increasingly more important to us as a region. As we move away from the high-end sort of boutique research companies where you need 15 years of college, and we move closer towards manufacturing and production, there's a real opportunity, not just for companies, but for average everyday Philadelphians to get involved in workforce in Philadelphia. So, when we think of the traditional life science job, we think of PhD level. Now, I think we're moving more towards perhaps an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree working on a manufacturing line. A big part of that is the need to prepare our workforce. So how can the business industry here, the business community, how can they band together to sort of prepare Philadelphians for jobs in the life sciences regionally and of course locally?
Sam, I'm happy to jump in first to acknowledge two amazing programs that are already in the region. The first is the partnership with CCP and the Wistar Institute and their biotechnology training program. It's an amazing program that is training the next generation of worker bees for biotech companies. The other one, which is not in Philadelphia, of course, is the Jefferson Center out at Springhouse at the old Roman Haas facility, where they are training for biotechnology, not drug development, but for biopharmaceuticals, and are now committed to cell and gene therapy. And there was just the public announcement of a grant to Montgomery County Community College as well. So if the corporates really want to help, they can support these kinds of programs, because that's exactly, the companies are screaming for talent, and it's sophisticated talent. And they're struggling to get it. They're recruiting people from Boston, from North Carolina, and they can't fill positions. So we're going to have to generate them locally. And these are just a couple of the programs that are out there that are amazing. You get other programs coded by kids. A lot of the programs that the Science Center is doing through their STEM. This is where it's going to happen. And if the corporates want to get involved, one of the ways they can do that is help sponsor these programs to help them expand.
That's a really good point by honorary panel member Tony Green. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to just, I'm sorry, Lynn, go ahead. I see Lynn from Jefferson.
Thank you, Megan. And Tony, thank you. The check is in the mail. I'm Lynn Kugel with the Jefferson Institute for Bio.
We're Ben Franklin. We're always looking for money to invest, regardless of source.
Look no farther. We are here. The Jefferson Institute of Bioprocessing was created by Thomas Jefferson University specifically for the purpose of addressing the critical workforce skills shortage in this space. We work both in monoclonal antibodies, traditional legacy biopharmaceuticals, as well as in cell and gene therapies. And, for companies that are located here or considering locating here, we, I think, offer a tremendous solution, not just for upskilling your current workforce to make sure that they are prepared to meet the challenges that you are confronting and to move as your molecules and the like advance, but also to give you confidence in hiring. We do onboarding programs so you can hire people who may not have the exact skill sets that you're looking for, and they can come here, get hands-on training and skills, and return to you with the ability to make an immediate impact and not make mistakes there, because we've taken care of that here. And I'm happy to talk to anyone, offline or further if, that would be helpful. So thank you.
Lynn and Tony, those are great points. The JIB up in the suburbs and Wistar and Community College of Philadelphia are all just fantastic resources for our workforce here. And we thank you for all the work that you're doing.
May I just jump in real quick, because I just want to add another perspective to the question about talent and workforce development. First of all, Lynn is part of a really exciting program for this region. I mean, the work that JIB is doing is really world class, and we're very lucky to have them here. That's something that we all need to be promoting when we're talking about our region, for sure. Same with Wistar and all the others. So the Chamber CEO of Council for Growth, in partnership with University City Science Center and the University City District, about a year or two ago, commissioned a study that was performed by eConsult Solutions that found that the future talent needs of our region's cell and gene therapy and connected health sectors is expected to grow between 35 to 94% in the next 10 years using mid-range growth estimates. So considering those are mid-range growth estimates, these are pretty incredible figures. And since then, the Chamber has formed a life sciences talent pipeline collaborative that is an employer-led effort to think about ways to kind of fill this future pipeline need. So that's, I think a great initiative as well. And there's clearly opportunity in our region, and talent is, of course, extremely important in the site selection process. Sam and I and Tom, to a degree, we are accustomed to dealing with requests for information and proposals from site selectors around the country who are dealing with major clients who are thinking about locating, let's say, a manufacturing or an R&D facility in Greater Philadelphia. And talent is probably a very close second to site availability in that RFI process. If we look at if all of you kind of read the news, was it yesterday in the PBJ, that 4 biotherapeutics, an Israel-based precision oncology company, just chose Philadelphia for its headquarters, and they'll be setting up at CIC. Their CEO talks about the strength of the region's talent in all areas of drug development, and the major universities, the healthcare institutions, lab space, all of that was a kind of real driving factor for that company. And then if you ask any other companies in recent years who've located in Greater Philadelphia, whether that's Amicus Iovance, Idorsia Pharmaceuticals, et cetera, they all cite the talent pool as being a strength in our market that is compelling and frankly not as tight as Boston's. So this is a narrative that we really have to hit on if we're going to keep attracting business.
And I'll just note, I think to Megan's point and to Lynn and Tony, what they really highlighted was those public-private partnerships. So I know, just another example, Merck had a long-standing relationship with the Montgomery County Community College. Those kinds of partnerships are crucial, and they're really important to highlight on the advocacy side, because frankly, I don't know what the appetite is like for new workforce development money in Harrisburg. I know, as part of the governor's budget proposal back in February, he had a pretty significant workforce development proposal in there. I think it was about $1 billion or so in workforce development spending. The hang up though is that it was funded by a tax on the Marcellus shale extraction, which is something that's not popular. Getting back to our kind of geographic political dynamics here, and in conversations with offices there, it was clear that in order to really move on something workforce related and maybe specific to the life sciences, we would essentially need to be advocating for a Marcellus shale extraction tax, which is, I think an unfortunate position to put the life sciences industry in, as pitting us against another industry. I think that is a difficult position to be in. But again, all the more reason why it's really important to highlight these public-private partnerships that exist, without direct intervention from Harrisburg, and then hopefully Harrisburg comes along. But I think just to note how those political dynamics affect discussions like this, I think it's helpful to have that context.
And as we think about workforce development, and there are people who have done just a phenomenal job at this already. I believe Phil Butler, my former colleague and current Science Center employee, is on this Zoom as well, who's just been thinking about this at such a high level. So one of the things that came up in a recent conversation was that perhaps the awareness from Philadelphia residents about the opportunities in life sciences isn't as great as it could be. Perhaps they don't know that these jobs are out there and these jobs are actually accessible and they don't exist in some ivory tower. How can we as a city and we as a business community, what sort of community engagement strategies can we undertake to get the word out? I know Megan, the Chamber and Select, has really been thinking about this. And so what sort of work is being done and what sort of work to get the word out and in terms of a community engagement strategy is needed?
That is something that our team at the CEO Council is doing. That work is led by Patty Day. So she's really kind of in the weeds on the community kind of engagement strategy. And honestly, I can't really speak to it here, but I'm really happy to connect anybody who's interested in learning more to Patty.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to move in, we're sort of coming up on time, but I want to move into sort of the last topic that we have slated for today. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. It seemed like when I started at the Department of Commerce 4 years ago, the biggest question was real estate. Do we have enough lab space? Do we have enough of the right kind of lab space? Where can the lab space be built? Now, it seems like thanks to all the development and all the investment in Philadelphia, that question has sort of dissipated. But it's still an issue. Real estate is still an issue, and sort of the specificity of lab real estate makes it kind of a difficult question to answer. But how has the business community and how can the business community advocate for more lab space? And are there kind of innovative strategies that have been taken elsewhere? I know the CIC at 3675 Market is probably best practices for innovative lab space, but how can we as a business community advocate for more and make sure that's built?
Sam, let me just jump in here, and I'm not really representing the business community, so to speak, but if you just sort of highlight the pipeline and the demand, and there's a little bit of a mismatch, right? It's kind of lumpy. It's not an even. You don't build exactly the amount of space you need for the market, but the demand seems, certainly in the city, and I think it's the case throughout the region, well in excess of what is even underway and on the books. There'll be a period of time as each of those products come on market for them to lease up, but my concern is that it's this unevenness to it. It's not a smooth progression, and perhaps we'll see as the sort of the products that are being developed right now come online, and probably get filled pretty quickly, that will not only spur the next wave, but maybe spur a broader level of investment in that wave. I think people are still taking a bit of a wait and see attitude. And there's a lot of investment going on, so it's a little bit sort of kind of seems awkward to say that, but I think there's more demand than even the space that's being built, and people just want to see how that works out. But I would say lab space feels like it's working itself out. The market is functioning, maybe not as quickly as anybody would like to see. I think the next real challenge is going to be manufacturing space, because everybody, you know, just a numbers game. There's so much lab space and so many companies and labs. I don't know what the success rate is, but even if it's a modest percentage, suddenly you're going to have the next wave of, all right, now we need to make the product, and I think we're going to repeat this same cycle again. And so I would advocate that the next, if you want to get ahead of something, it's on the manufacturing side.
To Tom's point, if you look at real estate, in this case, manufacturing, as a little sort of, you know, an indicator of what's coming down the pike, Discovery Labs, the expansion of the PA Biotech Center in Doylestown, Springhouse. Now you've got 3.0 University Place. Groundbreaking is actually on Thursday. There's going to be manufacturing space in there. But what I found most interesting is the commitment of Gattuso to build a 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility down at the Navy Yard on spec. I mean, I was blown away when I heard that. They're looking for one company to fill 100,000 square feet of cell and gene therapy space, although I'm trying to get them to think about pilot labs as well. But companies don't commit to that kind of expense without knowing that there's a there. You've also got the new, you know, whatever Drexel's doing down in Schuylkill Yards. So the report that came out, Tom, from PIDC a couple of years ago said we don't have enough space. Things are happening now that are doing that, and that's also going to be an attractant. And that's the other big piece. That's a sell that you can make to outsiders to get them here.
So Tony, should we just do another report that says we're short of manufacturing space and that'll work itself out?
You know, that report has tremendous resonance.
So we are coming up on the end of our conversation, but I think a very important question just came up. How do we define lab space? What does lab space mean? Is that space where we breed golden Labrador retrievers? Is that space where we do science work? How do we define lab space?
Also manufacturing space. We had that same question just pop up.
Yeah, does anybody have a good answer?
So when I'm thinking about lab space, I'm thinking of BSL-2, you know, basic molecular biology can be done, not working with any bad bugs. And then manufacturing space would be a facility that can be qualified for GMP production.
I think that is about all the time we have. I know this conversation could go on probably for another 2 years, and it definitely will in internal emails. So I think anyone who has any more questions for any of the panelists, I think can feel free to reach out. I hope I'm not putting any of you guys on the spot. Certainly feel free to reach out to me about anything the city of Philadelphia is doing. I want to thank everybody for taking part of this, and I want to